Hey guys, it's Haley and welcome to another bookish video. Today I'm going to be getting into my top 10 thrillers of all time that you need to read before you die, that I would take to a deserted island. Basically, if I only could keep 10 thrillers on my shelves, I'm going to be showing you the 10 that I could not bear to get rid of. Now, if you're a seasoned thriller reader, you're probably going to already have read most of these. These are just the basics, the essential reading list for any thriller lover. Hopefully there's one in here that you haven't read yet, but I've been getting a lot of comments and DMs asking for like thrillers for beginners, or like what are the essential thrillers that I recommend. These are those, the top 10 thrillers you need to read before you die, or before you get into the other wild world of thrillers. These are the top 10 that you should have in your read list, in my opinion. And of course, as always with my sit down videos, there will be some bonus content over on Patreon. So I'll be giving my next 3 on this list on Patreon. If you want 3 more of my best essential thriller recommendations, you can go over there. The extended cut will be linked down below on Patreon. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the top 10. You can probably guess my first book just out of the gate. It's not like I've named my book club after this book or anything. The number 1 book that you could never pry off the shelves, you could never take from my cold dead hands, is Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter. It is my favorite book of all time. I have a tattoo of this locket on my body. If you didn't know, now you know. This is the book that really changed my perspective on thrillers, okay? They're not just a fluffy throwaway genre. They can mean so much, and this book means so much to me. It is intense emotionally, and with the graphic details of some of the torture that happens in this book, it is a very, very intense read. It is dark and it is graphic, but if you can handle that, I highly recommend Pretty Girls. It is my most recommended book. It is what I'm known for on my channel. It is the namesake of my book club. I will never stop recommending Pretty Girls by Karen Slaughter, and this is my number 1 pick. Obviously, none of these are going to be ranked in order, but if I had to pick a number 1 where I could only keep one thriller forever and ever and amen, it would have to be Pretty Girls. I highly suggest going into Pretty Girls blind. That's the way that I read it. I knew absolutely nothing about the book before I picked it up, and it became my favorite book of all time instantly. I instantly binged the whole thing because I could not put it down. But if you want some kind of synopsis to get you excited about it, to get you into it, I would pitch this as the perfect couple until something horrifying happens and the wife has to grapple with what's left. She makes some increasingly gruesome discoveries throughout the book. And our main character, you think she's just like a hoity-toity rich white lady who lives in suburbia. She is so much more than that, and her strength and her resilience and her foils, like all of it, it's so much. The family dynamics in this book are amazing. Everything from the pacing to the character development, it's phenomenal. So now that that one's out of the way, let's get to the rest of the list, which, as I mentioned, is in no particular order. Moving on, we have Not So Perfect Strangers by L.S. Stratton. I just really think that this is a perfect thriller. I don't know if this is like one of the most widely recommended thrillers. I actually don't hear too many people talking about it, but it definitely deserves a place on my essential thriller list. If I was trapped on a deserted island, I would be able to read this over and over and over and never get bored. I feel like I could find something new in this book every time I read it. Not only is the pacing phenomenal, it has that quick pace and unputdownable feeling of a good thriller, but it also has that level of social commentary and like something to say, which I feel like a thriller to make it in my essential list twist has to have a little something to say, like at least a little nugget of wisdom in there somewhere. This one definitely has more than a nugget. Okay, you get the whole 10 piece with this. In this book, we are following two women who are trying to escape their abusive spouses. One woman is a well-off white woman, and one woman is a black woman who has kind of everything set up against her, and their paths end up crossing and they decide to help each other out. However, things that seemed like a perfect clandestine meeting at first become increasingly flawed as the book goes on, and they discover more about each other. I love the character development in this book. I love the twists. I love the resolution. Like I said, this to me is a perfect thriller. Next up, we have a true classic, especially if you love domestic thrillers and rich people drama, and y'all know I do, and that is Big Little Lies by Liane Moriarty. Oh my god, y'all, look at this copy of this book. It is like busted and so old, and it looks like very early 2000s. I can't. I love it. In this book, we are following the moms of Monterey Bay, okay? They are rich, and like when I say rich, I mean they are uber rich. They are snotty, they will backstab you, and they are obsessed with their little children. They all meet up at this little coffee shop around the corner from the elementary school, and they talk shit about everybody else. And they all seem to be absolutely perfect. Like they're this perfect friend group until someone dies in their midst, and we have to figure out who killed them and also who died, because that is kind of like in suspense throughout the majority of the book as well. I feel like this is the blueprint for every rich people drama murder mystery I've ever read. Like this was the blueprint for Keep Your Friends Close by Lucinda Berry, for every Lucy Foley book, for every Meg Mitchell Moore book, for Bad Summer People. If you like any of those and you haven't read this, please pay homage to the original. I feel like Big Little Lies is just that girl. And if you haven't watched the TV show adaptation of Big Little Lies, oh my god, you have to. It's so good. I don't even like TV, okay? Y'all know I would much rather 10 times out of 10 be reading a book than watching the television. I never watch TV. My friends actually make fun of me for having the smallest TV known to man. I just don't really care about it. But the Big Little Lies TV adaptation is phenomenal. I love it. Next up, we have another essential, and this book is one that I hear like most commonly in people's top thriller picks. All different types of people, all different types of thriller tastes. I feel like this one is universally loved. I've really never heard a bad review about it, and that is Sometimes I Lie by Alice Feeney. This is one that is so short, so quick. You can definitely read it in one setting, and we are following a woman who is in a coma, and she is just tangentially aware of what is going on around her. She knows that her husband is there and she doesn't really trust him, like she's afraid of him. So the reader is kind of led to believe that something that he did led to her being in the coma. But we also know that sometimes our narrator lies. Those are the three essential facts we know about her. She's in a coma, she doesn't trust her husband, and she lies. So she's extremely unreliable the entire time. We are second guessing everything she says. We are trying to put the pieces together through her like befuddled state, not only being in the coma but also being a deceptive person. It is such a fun time to try to put everything together, and the twist absolutely shocked me. I feel like this twist has been replicated and replicated and replicated to death, but this one was the original, the first one to do it. So that is why Sometimes I Lie gets a spot in my top 10. Next up, we have a newer release from the last few years that I just feel like reset the thriller genre and set the standard for not only the commentary, the level of commentary that I expect from my thrillers, but also the level of darkness that is justified to be in thrillers. And that is The Last Housewife by Ashley Winstead. This is a really special book because it captures so many different aspects of womanhood and what it's like to be a woman faced with abusive relationships, faced with with misogyny, faced with even the parts of misogyny that serve you, especially if you are a white woman. A lot of that is talked about in this book through the lens of a wealthy white woman who is listening to a true crime podcast on a leisurely day when she realizes that the case that's being discussed is actually something she was a part of. They are talking about the supposed alleged suicide of her college roommate that she believes was never a suicide, and connecting it to a new suicide on the college campus where she went. So she travels back to her campus to dig into what happened in the past and what's happening now. It sounds like a very basic setup. I also hate that there's a podcast element because I feel like that sounds so basic and just like every other thriller and discourages people from reading it. But this book is special. The relationship dynamics, the development of our main character, it's just unmatched. And as I spoke to earlier, the level of darkness. Okay, this book is graphic, it is gory, it depicts horrible violence against women, but it is not for no reason. Okay, the commentary that goes along with it is so dense, but washes over in a way that makes it really easy to digest. I really love everything about this book. It was in my top favorites of the year, and it's one that I could, again, read over and over and over. If I was stuck on an island, I would be reading this and crying and feeling catharsis and feeling all the things every single day, all day long. Next up, we have another classic. If you have been around since the beginning of my channel, you will definitely remember this recommendation. There was a stretch that I used to recommend this book in like every other video that I made, and that is Behind Closed Doors by B.A. Paris. I absolutely love this book. I just think it's so dark and so cleverly written, and B.A. Paris really hasn't done it like this since this release. In this book, we are following Grace, okay? You know a book is good if I remember the character names. After years have passed since I last read this book, that's crazy. And Grace marries Jack, and they seem like the perfect couple, but behind closed doors, Grace is living a nightmare. And we are following her in a dual timeline, both in the present as she's trying to escape, and in the past as we're learning everything that's happened to her, rooting for her to get out of this abusive situation. There are little good for her nods in there, but overall it is just such a horrifying thriller. There's no massive twists. The majority of this book is just being absolutely horrified by Jack and the things that he's willing to do to the person that he married. It is chilling, it is creepy, it is fast-paced. I devoured this book because I needed to see our queen escape, and the ending of the book was crazy. This remains one of my favorites, and I feel like it's hit or miss, but for me, it's an essential. Next up, we have really the book that got me into my thriller era and had me start my channel. A lot of these other books I read after I already started making videos. I actually read Pretty Girls in my very first reading vlog I ever filmed on this channel, which is crazy. But this is the book that really got me back into my reading era in 2016, and that is Luckiest Girl Alive by Jessica Knoll. It was recently adapted into a movie, and I also really like the movie, so I highly recommend both, but this one is definitely in my top 10 thriller essentials. We are following a woman who has seemingly the perfect life, but she has a secret, and the past is following her, and we have to figure out what is going on presently and how it's connected to what happened in the past. I know that sounds so vague, but I promise you it's so good. There is so much commentary packed into this book. I feel like this is the first thriller that I read that really let me know, oh, you can have like a real voice in a thriller. It doesn't just have to be about the plot, because this book is character driven and commentary driven. I could not put this book down. It was twisty, it was unpredictable, I was in for the story. This was another one that I binged in a day, and it's one that I recommend to everyone because not many people have read it. I feel like no one else is recommending it anymore, and I just need to remind you, if you are just now getting into thrillers, don't forget about this one. Add it to your list immediately because I'm taking this one to the island. Getting into our last few here, we have Gone Girl by Gillian Flynn. This book set me up from 8th grade to be a thriller reader. Okay, I read this way too early, way too young in 8th grade, but the twist in this book shocked the socks off of me. Okay, I could not believe it. I was obsessed. It awakened that little good for her part of my little 13-year-old self, and from then on, I was done. I was in. I was going to be a thriller and horror lover. I did not know the feeling that I was chasing from watching horror movies could be replicated in a written work, and Gone Girl showed me that. I am forever grateful that I read this book as young as I did because it is just amazing. I feel like this is literature. Okay, the cool girl monologue, can we talk about how poignant that is? How of the time and of the moment and yet timeless that monologue is? This is another one with an amazing film adaptation. I wish I could have this and the film adaptation while I'm on the island. If you haven't read this one, you need to get on it before you die because I'm telling you, it's the best. Next up, we have Razorblade Tears by S.A. Cosby. This one was my favorite of a few years back. I feel like this one is universal. I was talking about this, I think, on the podcast with Deja. We think anyone could read this book and enjoy it. It doesn't matter who you are, how old you are, where you come from, the color of your skin. Anyone will love and connect to someone somewhere in this book. We are following two dads, a white guy and a black guy, and their sons were in a relationship and they were killed because of a hate crime. They think that their sons were murdered for being gay, basically, which is really sad. But these two dads, who are kind of like not as accepting as we wish they were of their sons, set out on a quest to avenge their sons' deaths nonetheless, and they end up learning a lot about each other and about their queer kids on the journey. But not only is it this emotional upheaval throughout the book, it is also graphic. It is intensely violent. It reads like a fucking crazy action movie. A man who is resistant to reading would get on board with reading this book. So if you're a thriller girly and you're trying to make your man into a thriller reader, give him this. He might be hooked. I don't know. Don't quote me on that. But if I had to give one to force feed to a man to turn them into a thriller lover, this is what I would pick. And the last book that I have here to round out my top 10 thrillers to read before you die is The Last Mrs. Parrish by Liv Constantine, and really this whole series. I read this one first, and then I read the prequel, The First Shot. It's a little novella, and then I read this new release that came out this year, The Next Mrs. Parrish. I loved all three of them. I gave them all 5 stars, and y'all know this is the blueprint for me. This is the original bitch, I'm gonna steal your fucking life book, and I love that. I love when a scrappy little nobody just comes out of nowhere and sees this rich woman who has everything that she wants and says, bitch, I'm gonna steal your life. And that is the plot of this book. But there are major twists that you will not see coming. The rich people vibes are absolutely dreamy, summery, immaculate. I could read this book for the vibes alone. And it's been recreated about a million fucking ways to Sunday because everybody wants a piece of this plot. It is phenomenal. And allegedly that includes Frida McFadden, because fuck you, Frida McFadden, for allegedly stealing this plot and profiting off of it and creating your own series off of Liv Constantine's ideas, allegedly. I will never get off my soapbox about that, and I will never stop recommending this book. And that'll round it out for my top 10 thrillers. Essential thriller reading. You should read them before you die. You should take them to the desert island. You will never see them leaving my shelves if I ever unhaul any of these. Somebody come to my house and assassinate me. Actually, don't do that. Anyway, that's all for today's video. I hope you guys, even you seasoned thriller readers out there, got a couple good recs from this video. Thank you so much for watching. If you liked it, go ahead and give me a like and subscribe to my channel if you haven't already. And of course, don't forget to read a book and go to therapy this week. I will see you guys in my next video. Bye!